conversation. So, Susie Richmond is the executive director of Neighborhood Cats, having served in that role since 2010. She oversees hands on TNR programs in New York City, Jersey City, and on the island of Maui, as well as using her prior Madison Avenue advertising experience to write, among other things, crowdfunding appeals to help the many sick and injured cats who come Neighborhood Cats' way. One of her favorite projects currently is a veterinary scholarship program designed to train community cat-oriented vets on high-volume spay-neuter techniques. When she's not in the office, you can find Susie out in the fields of Maui, where she recently passed the 1,000 cats trapped mark. And then we have Brian Cordes, who serves as Neighborhood Cats National Program Director and Susie Richmond's husband. Back in 1999, while working in Manhattan as both an attorney and a video director, Brian co-founded Neighborhood Cats after TNRing a colony near where he lived. Except for a 6-year stint as grants manager for PetSmart Charities, he's been with the organization ever since. He has authored or co-authored handbooks on grassroots TNR, community TNR, and return to field programs. You can always find him online, where he regularly presents both basic and advanced webinars on all things trap, neuter, return, in partnership with the Community Cats podcast. All right, I'm going to hand this over to you now, Brian.
Okay, thank you, Stacy, and thanks everybody for taking time out today to become hopefully better trappers and learn some of the tips we've gathered over the years. I want to mention again the handouts. One of the handouts is a PDF of all the slides that you'll see today, so you don't need to be madly scrambling to take notes or worrying about copying links or things like that. Just download the slides. And then there's also the Neighborhood Cats TNR Handbook, which is meant as a reference material. If there's any topic you want to go into in more detail, you'll likely find it in there. And then for those of you who are getting continuing education credit with NACA, there's a handout on exactly how to go about that. And again, be sure to contact Stacy. Stacy did mention our certification workshop. The next one is on April 6th. There's a $10 fee, and it's really a basic training on trap, neuter, return. So for those of you who are starting out or have a little bit of experience, you might well benefit from taking it. But go ahead and check it out on the Community Cats podcast website. Okay, so we're going to get started. The initial 10 minutes or so are going to be going over just some of the basics. So you more experienced people are going to know this stuff, but I want to make sure that the advanced stuff doesn't work if you don't know the real basics. So just going to kind of quickly go over some of that. And the first thing to be an effective trapper is for the cats you're trapping to be on a feeding pattern. And that means they're at the same time, they're being fed at the same time, same place, or as close as possible to that. And that allows you to not go running around the neighborhood trying to find them, but it allows them to come to you, which is a much more effective way of trapping. Also, it allows you to control the food source. You can withhold food since you're the one in control of it. So if there's a feeding pattern already in place, you're going to want to just use that. If there isn't one, pick a time that's good for your trapping. Don't set up a feeding pattern at 3 in the morning if you're not a night owl, but do it just after dark or something like that. A tip is when you're feeding the cats, teach them a unique sound. So it might be a clicker or a whistle, or you jingle your keys. Sometimes they learn to recognize the sound of your engine. But the reason to have a sound is like when you're trapping, if you're doing a mass trapping, you're trying to get all the cats in that particular group, you're going to put your traps out, you're going to have your first wave, and then some of them are going to get frightened and fade into the background. And if you have a sound, you wait a little bit, let things calm down a little bit, and then you use that sound that they associate with food. A lot of the ones you didn't get on the first try are going to come back out in response to that noise. So train them not just to eat at a certain time and place, but to associate a certain sound with the food. Remember that hunger. We're going to talk about a lot of fancy stuff today. And nothing is ever more important when it comes to traditional box traps and the way you catch cats than how hungry they are. So you can do everything wrong, but if the cat hasn't eaten for 2 or 3 days, the chances are very high that they're going to go into your trap. And on the other hand, you could do all these tricks and everything perfectly, and if they just ate, you're gonna have a very hard time catching them. So withhold food for 24 to 48 hours before the trapping, and always have water present at the site. So there's no food, but there's always water available for them. If you're doing a mass trapping, which we define as the TNR of an entire colony at one time, these are some of the tips you're going to want to keep in mind. So have more traps than the number of cats. So if you're after 12 cats, have 14 traps. And the reason for that is when you get down to cats number 11 and 12, you want to have 3 or 4 traps out to catch them, not just 1 or 2. Leave yourself at least 2 days. You're probably not going to catch everybody on day 1. There'll be at least a few that are a little more difficult, and that second day will allow you to get them. One mistake we see a lot of people make is don't just use one kind of bait. There are cats out there, believe it or not, who don't like tuna. And if you have tuna and a little bit of chicken friskies or some dry food, your chances of getting everybody are higher. Put all the traps out at the same time, not one by one. Place them against things. That's an important tip. Sometimes we see people take traps and put them like in the middle of the driveway. The cats will be a little less suspicious if the trap is against something they're familiar with and it seems like it's part of that. So against a wall, under a bush, things like that. And look for hot spots. So in the beginning of a mass trapping, when a cat goes in, cover them up, take them away, and move another trap to that exact same spot. And you're going to find that for some reason, there are going to be certain locations where they are less fearful and they just keep going in, and that's the way you find what we call those hot spots. So a tip for everybody, especially when you're doing a mass trapping, is use the caretaker's routine to draw out the cats during the trapping. So we like to have the caretaker with us, and we have them at the beginning of a mass trapping, or any trapping for that matter, we have them go through their routine and fake it. So they don't actually put food out, but they get the plates, they prepare however they usually prepare, they put the plates and stuff on the ground, they shake their jar of crunchies, they make whatever sounds they usually make. So everything seems kind of normal, as close to normal as possible. And again, that will make the cats a little more comfortable and more likely to come out for you. So traps, of course, are your number one tool. For those of you who aren't familiar with the different kinds of traps, the traps that people who trap a lot and who are professional trappers, they tend to prefer what are called gravity traps. And these are traps like the one you see here, which is the TrueCatch Model 30 LTD. The front door is not on a spring. So when the cat goes in and steps on the trip plate that you see raised in the middle there, they step on the trip plate, it forces the front door to close. That door closes very quietly, as opposed to what are called spring-loaded traps, which shut very quickly and very loudly. So if you're not using gravity traps now and you have an opportunity to do that, you want to start to switch over to them if you're doing a lot of trapping. And as I say, your more advanced trappers are going to be preferring gravity traps. So it used to be TrueCatch was the only one on the market, but then we came along and it's a great trap. The TrueCatch is a great trap, but it does have a couple of problems. And so we worked with Tomahawk to solve those, and that has to do with the TrueCatch model doesn't have any locks on the door. They can be difficult to set if you're not used to them. So we came out a couple of years ago with the model GT606, which you see here. It's also a gravity trap, but it does have locks on the doors, and it's a lot easier to set. And here you can see more of the explanation for it. So it's got a knot, what's called a notch trigger. So there's only one setting that you can put this trap on. So there's no way to set it incorrectly. It's got a lock on, an automatic lock on the front door, and a clip lock on the back. Also, the back door is recessed just a little bit, leaves a little less room for the bait dish, but it keeps the trap from getting banged up over time because the frame of the rear door is more protected. So anyway, that's just a quick primer on the two, recommended gravity traps that are out there. Now, this may be something a lot of you are not familiar with yet, or maybe you've heard about it. So I wanted to take this opportunity to introduce this to you. This is called the Roundhouse Trap, another Tomahawk product, and you can see it's a very odd looking trap, right? It's round, and the cats walk in. There's a little wall to the right of the door, the front door there. You can't see the front door because it's pushed in, and that door, once it's pushed in, kind of shields the bait dish, and the cats have to go into the trap, walk around the front door to get to the bait, which is hanging on the side. And when they get to the bait, they step on a plate that causes the front door to shut. And it's not a trap you would use as like your go-to trap for lots of cats, but it's great for what you'll find is different cats have different preferences, and a cat that's wary of going into a normal box trap like we were just showing you will go right into a roundhouse because something about it will not be scary to them, or they'll be a little more interested in it. So it's often good in trapping to offer a variety of different types of traps to see which ones the cats will go into. So you might have, if you're after those 12 cats, maybe you have 1 or 2 roundhouse traps out there, as well as the regular box traps. Now, a couple of tricks if you're using this. It's kind of awkward to get the cat out. It's great for getting the cat in, but the way you get them out is through a side door, and that's where you see the red arrow pointing. That's actually the transfer door. So once your cat is trapped, the cat's going to go through the transfer door into the back of a regular gravity or box trap. So this is, we have a kitty in here, and you're going to have to tilt the trap upwards so that now the side door isn't pointing up at the sky, it's on the side. This is where you need to be careful about what kind of bait you use, because if you put like a lot of gravy or wet food and tuna with a lot of juice in it, when you tilt the trap up, it's going to pour all over the cat. So you want to do something like dry food with maybe a little bit of tuna juice, poured on top of it, or Temptations, or something that isn't going to get all over the cat when you do this. So once the trap is tilted up, then the transfer out is similar to out of a drop trap, which is you line up the rear door of the box trap with the side door of the roundhouse. You cover the trap the cat's going into with a sheet, except for the rear, which should be left open so it looks like a way out. You've got spring clips. You can see there on the bottom in the middle, see how the box trap is clipped to the roundhouse trap. So once that's all in place, you lift the 2 doors, you uncover the roundhouse, and 90% of the time the cats will just transfer themselves. They'll walk into the box trap, you close the doors, and you're good to go. Another standard for us, and I think it's becoming more and more known, is what we call trap mats. And that's the silver mat that you see on the floor of the trap. And you see how there's a trail of bait on it. And the cat is sort of licking the little bits of bait and slowly working her way towards the back of the trap, and most importantly, towards the trip plate. So they also have the advantage of not only can you leave a trail of bait, but they make the floor of the trap more comfortable and inviting for those paws. And we use them every time we trap. It's just part of our standard equipment now. You can, the material that we use is called PVC coin, was it coin metallic PVC? I don't know, it's on there. Anyway, it's a specialized material that they use on jet walks and elevators and things like that. You know, surfaces that are often well trafficked, but you want to be able to, you know, you want it to hold up, and you want to be able to clean it easily. So you can do that with this stuff. And we used to cut cardboard, but we got really tired of cutting cardboard every time we went out trapping. So we started using this stuff instead. You can get it pre-cut at Tomahawk. So if you've only got a trap or two, that may be you know, a good idea, because they'll get you a mat that fits like a glove. On the other hand, if you have a lot of traps, you probably don't want to be spending, you know, $20, $25 for each of these mats. You can go onto Amazon and order a big roll of it. We recommend the 4-foot by 8-foot roll, and you can cut that up with a pair of scissors and a yardstick into a couple of dozen mats, and you'll get your cost down to $3 or $4 per mat. I want to show you a quick video of the mat in action and why we like it so much. And this is, you know, our one of our house kitties who's volunteered to demonstrate. So that's Violet, and that's great the way she, you know, she's a little upset, and then she goes right back to eating the tuna. But you see the way she worked her way in by following that trail. That's why that's such an effective method to use out in the field as well. And Violet will come up again later this presentation. So, okay, moving on from trap mats. Just another kind of quick tip. When you're putting your traps out, now that you have the cats on a feeding pattern, you know where they're going to be and when they're going to be there. Another good place to put traps besides where they eat is any paths that they follow to get to the feeding location. So if you can discover paths of travel, and in the wintertime you can look for paw prints in the snow. That's the reason for this slide. Then when you're trapping, you put your traps not just at the feeding site, but along those paths, and you'll get a few that way. So now let's talk about the hard to catch cats, which is really, I know what a lot of you guys are here for. And you can see this particular kitty was left after all her companions had been caught, and she's still wandering around. So she qualified. All right, so how do we catch these cats where, like in this slide, you got everybody else, you really want to get to 100%, because you know that's what we're always aiming for when it comes to colonies of cats. And but they just won't go in. You know, you've withheld the food for 2 days, you've put mats in, you've done everything right, just will not cooperate. And there's almost always one in every crowd. So we're going to talk to you now about, and by the way, if you have questions as I'm going, you know, just send them over to Susie in the questions box. And if she doesn't get to you right away, then she will eventually. If not today, then after the webinar. So our favorite way to catch these guys is what's called a drop trap. And this is what you see here. This is this square looking thing that's raised up in the front. And basically the idea is, as you can see, the cat goes in, there's a bowl of bait in the back. They go in, they're eating the bait. You can see that the trap is raised on a prop stick with a string attached to it. Once the cat has her head in the bowl and is eating, you yank the string and you've caught your cat. And then you transfer out through the side, similar to the roundhouse trap. And the great advantage to the drop trap is that the reason you have to get cats really hungry normally is because they're wary of going into box traps, those gravity traps we were showing you before that are generically called box traps. They're afraid of going into a long, narrow space, and the hunger is what you need to get them to overcome that fear. They don't have the same fear, most of them, when it comes to box traps and going under something as opposed to going into something. And as a result, cats that won't go anywhere near a box trap will just march right under a drop trap if they haven't eaten just that day. So psychologically, it's a big improvement over regular traps, and to the point where there are many trappers who just use drop traps. They don't use box traps except to transfer out of drop traps. We use a combination. Typically, we'll put box traps out because a lot of cats will go into them. But when we get to the point where they're starting to, the ones that are left are looking kind of reluctant or wary, then we'll break out the drop trap and try to pick the rest of them off that way. I'm going to show you a video that goes through the basics of using a drop trap for those of you who are not familiar with it. So this is, let me explain. This is a kitty who in a colony of about 20 cats. So I know one of the questions people have is like, how do you pick out that last cat? You've caught 11 of the 12. How do you get number 12 without constantly retrapping the other ones or having them fill the traps and never the one that you're after? Again, the drop trap is great for picking a cat out. So in this case, this kitty you see in the slide here, this tabby in white, he showed up in a colony of about 20 cats who had already been TNR'd. So we were only after him and set up the drop trap. And you can see we put a giant plate of food there because we wanted to leave enough that all the cats could come in and have a bite, and we could wait it out until our guy came. So that's what the setup is for this. So there you have a basic example of a drop trap in action. And the thing is, this trap is such an incredible tool that we actually have another free webinar that will be coming up in June that's all about just the drop trap. And the first half of the webinar, it's also free, is going over the basics like that video, but broken down and step by step and little things to watch out. And then the second half is for you more advanced drop trappers to do things like what you see in this slide, where you can trap 6 or 7 cats at the same time, or how to drop trap on uneven surfaces, and how to use remote controls, and how to pull a string from a difficult angle, all that kind of stuff. So if you're going to be doing TNR for any length of time, you're going to want to learn how to use a drop trap, and this is the way to go. Now, if you want to watch this webinar before June 22nd, the one we did last year has been recorded, and you can access that at the same link on the Community Cats podcast website. So go ahead and check that out. But it is really one of our favorite tools. Now, what if you need to pick a cat out from your colony? Like maybe there's a young kitten and you want to get the kitten before they're too old to be easily socialized, or maybe there's an injured cat or whatever, and you can't get a drop trap right away. Well, there's a workaround, which is what we call the bottle and string trick, and that's what you see in this slide, where instead of using the trip plate and the trigger, and by the way, the trap you're looking at now, this is a spring, what we call a spring-loaded trap. Instead of setting the trigger, you open the front door and you prop it on a water bottle. So it can be like the kind you see here, like a giant thermos, or it could be a half gallon or a gallon, half gallon water bottle that's about half full, and you can tie the string around the top or around the bottom, whatever suits you. But the idea is that you're deciding when the trap door closes. So you put a big bowl of bait, like you see here, or just a pile of bait, as the case may be, in the back of the trap. You wait until the cat is all the way that you're after. You leave enough so that other cats can come and go. And when the cat you're after goes and is all the way in the back, be patient, wait until they're in the back and have their face in the food. You're going to yank that water bottle and shut the front door. So it's a great technique. It's not as effective as a regular drop trap because again, it's long and narrow. It's not wide and open, but it often works. And the big warning that I have for all of you who haven't done this before is don't try pulling the string for the very first time when the cat you want is in the trap. Set it up first and give it a yank or two so that you have a little bit of muscle memory and you know exactly how hard to pull. Because if you even have a split-second hitch in your motion, that's enough time for the cat to get out. Now, let's talk about trap training because this is and we're going to talk about, this is kind of basic trap training. And after our break, we're going to have a break and do some cat trivia. We're going to talk about more advanced trap training, but the principles are very much the same. And so I'm going to give you a case study of a cat whose name is Silver Bob. And she's part of a colony in a resort here on Maui, and so named because she has a little short bobtail. So we TNR'd everybody else in the colony at this location, but this cat was incredibly elusive. So what would happen was we'd show up with our equipment. She would take one look at us and that was it. She was gone for the day. So there was no point in even setting up a drop trap because you can't drop trap a cat that's not there, right? So we realized that the only way we were ever going to trap her was if we trained her. And she gave birth before we could begin the training. So we knew we had about 5 or 6 weeks until the kittens showed up. So we had a nice chunk of time. We didn't want to catch her before the kittens were old enough to take in. So we had a nice amount of time to train her. And the red circle you see here on this slide, that's where she was normally fed, was off this path and inside a bunch of trees. So the only one who ever could see her was the caretaker, the feeder. And so what we did was we took a trap, you can see on the right there. We wrapped it in a green sunshade to camouflage it a little bit, lifted the front door and zip tied it open. And then we locked it onto a tree because it wasn't entirely private. We felt like we were comfortable leaving it there, but we wanted to make it a little harder if somebody did decide they wanted their own trap. And we removed the rear door so that in the event somebody really wanted this trap, it would be useless to them. And then the trick is you want to start with the trap within view, far enough away that the cat is not frightened by the trap, but close enough that they can see it. So we set the trap 10, 15 feet away from her normal feeding spot. And you also, a trick we learned from this that we didn't do, which I'll pass on to you, is have a piece of cardboard or a mat or something like that in the trap that you can easily remove and clean. Otherwise, it can get quite dirty and smelly over the course of the training, especially if the training. Now, you don't need 5 or 6 weeks to train a cat. You can do it usually in 1 or 2, usually just 1 week. But in this case, particularly difficult cat, and we had time. So you start by feeding the cat at their normal spot, which is, again, is like 10, 15 feet away. So the idea is she's comfortable, she's getting used to the sight of the trap. Use a familiar bowl, but keep in mind that, and this is another mistake we made, the bowl is going to have to go into the trap. So this bowl is really too big. We should have substituted a smaller stainless steel bowl and trained her that way. But so we had to make a swap at the very end into a smaller stainless steel bowl, which is, a little risky because, the whole idea is to keep everything as familiar as possible. So use the right bowl. And the thing is, once the cat is eating comfortably and you see her there and she shows up at her normal time 2-3 days in a row, so she's not freaked out, by this new thing that she sees in the distance, then you start to move the bowl closer. So a foot, a two at a time. A lot of it depends on what your timeline is and how quickly you or slowly you move this. But you know, a foot or two at a time is good. And what you're doing, as you can see, is you're gradually moving the cat closer and closer to the trap. So this is probably, you know, a week or two in that she's this close. And again, you're letting the cat dictate the pace as much as you can, because you're waiting till she's comfortable, till she's gone there and eaten a couple of days in a row before you move it again. So you can see you know, we're at a point here where we've actually moved the bowl into the trap, and she has no problem sticking her head in, and there's no fear there anymore. And eventually, your goal is you're going to get the cat all the way into the trap. And once you've got that, you've accomplished that, then you're good to go. You can now set the trap. So in this case, with Silver Bob, like I said, we were waiting for her kittens. So there they are, they showed up. And we knew that, okay, we can catch mom now because the kittens are ready as well. So we decided, let's catch mom and then we'll catch the kittens. And sure enough, set the trap. I think it took 2 tries, but second time she went all the way in with it set, and we caught her. We got the kittens. One of them was incredibly difficult. It took like 3 days, but eventually we did get the whole family. And this is basically how you trap train. Now, if you want to, it depends again on your trapping circumstances. But if you're trapping in someone's backyard or a place which is safe to leave traps out, you don't have to just wait until there's a really difficult cat. You can train the whole colony to eat in traps. So if you're in, you know, we had someone who was feeding an 8-cat colony in their backyard. So a week or two before the trapping, they put out 8 traps and they left them there. They fed the colony in small bowls, and they did the same thing. Each day they gradually moved the bowls closer and closer to the traps until eventually, by the end of the week, they were all eating inside the trap. You do get a question about, well, what if they don't all go in at the same time and one of them gets scared and they hear another trap shut, so they run off. This particular person didn't have that problem. They all went in and they trapped all 8 of them. We did see somebody set up a very clever thing with where they put a board in front of a long plywood, or not a plywood, but a long piece of wood, you know, a flat board in front of all the traps, which they pulled away when the cats were all gathered, so that they pretty much all went in at the same time. We also had somebody who had 8 strings, each one tied, in this situation, a string tied to the front door of each trap. So they were holding all the trap front doors up at the same time. And when most of the cats were in, they dropped the doors. So that's getting really fancy. I think you're probably fine. Just set the traps normally, and the ones that run off are most likely going to come back, you know, probably that same day. So we were put in charge of the rescue operations out of the wildfire burn zone. And this little section of our presentation today, you might call it trapping lessons from the burn zone, because we did have a lot of challenges and then have to overcome them. So just to set the scene for you guys, it was really a horrible day on August 8th last summer. You can see just a little bit of the destruction in this slide, but it was a wildfire that destroyed 5.5 square miles, thousands of homes, over 100 people died, and it was all happened in just a matter of hours. It was such an intense fire. So from the animal point of view, the fire was so destructive that initially the emergency management authorities assumed that no no animal could have survived because most of the landscape was reduced to what you see here, which was just rubble and ashes. So there was about a 2-week delay in allowing animal rescuers to enter the burn zone, but they finally did, because we started to see photographic evidence and people would sneak in and they would see cats, and finally the authorities relented and they allowed certified animal search and rescue professionals to come in. And in the first week they were in, they rescued 89 cats. They trapped them and brought them to the Maui Humane Society. At the end of that deployment, the rest of the work was handed over to Neighborhood Cats with the assumption that there were only somewhere between 100 to 200 cats left in the professional's point of view. That was their belief. And they felt like, all right, we need cat trappers at this point to pick off these last ones. Well, now we can say 6.5 months later that there were over 600 cats who survived the fire and were living in the burn zone. And what happened was a lot of them jumped into the storm drains and went underground and rode the fire out and then just emerged after it was over. So in the beginning, with when we started to realize there were, a lot more cats in there than anybody thought, it just wasn't possible to bring them all in at once. The shelter was overcrowded before the fire, and then with 89 cats coming in a week, it was way overcrowded. So we didn't want to create a situation where we were taking cats out of the burn zone and putting them into potentially even a worse situation with where they would get sick and euthanasia would have to start becoming a possibility. So we instituted what you would call a shelter-in-place program, where we set up feeding stations throughout the burn zone, and then had both paid staff and volunteers filling them every day. And every day we got these bins out, excuse me, what you see, these storage bins where we, on the right there, where we cut open the front as a doorway, and then you see those plastic strips, and that's to keep the chickens, or at least deter them from eating all the food. They don't usually like to put their heads, the birds don't like to go through the plastic strips, but the cats don't really have much of a problem doing that. So we use small litter pans to put the food and the water in. And like I say, every day people would refresh them. And we had over 80 in the beginning. So it took about 3 or 4 people a day just to go around and service these stations. But we chose a reasonably high quality dry food, and just went about trying to keep these cats as well fed and safe as we could until there was time and space to get them out. So once we started trapping, which we were doing all along, but we kind of had to keep a cap on it. We couldn't bring too many in at once. So we would prioritize, try to identify pet cats or injured cats or hurt cats and get them in first. But overall, the first 80% of the cats, we went through the traditional way of trapping that we've talked about today. So we were able to withhold food because and we had cameras everywhere. We had cameras on all the stations, so we could know how many cats were eating there and how many there were in general. And we would withhold the food from, say, a section of the burn zone and put traps near the feeding stations. And it was almost always at night. The cats did not come out at all during the daytime. Part of it is because it's a very warm climate up there and the day is very hot and sunny, but with a lot of the shade destroyed, even more so, they just came out at night. So we did pretty well so for the first several months. And then we got to these cats who, no matter what we did, they would not go into box traps. And we would withhold food. We even got to a point where we didn't put food anywhere in the burn zone. And keep in mind, this area was highly restricted. There were people sneaking in and stuff like that, but not that many. And it was pretty difficult to get access. So at least initially, we had a pretty good grip on the food source, and we could control it. And no matter what, we would withhold food from the entire burn zone for 2 or 3 nights in a row, and these cats would still not go in the regular box traps. Part of the problem was a lot of them had already been trapped. They were ear tipped, and they knew what a trap was, and they would. I'm not sure what they did, whether they were hunting or there was just enough food somewhere else that somebody was putting out, but we just couldn't catch them. So we kind of had a moment where we realized trying to get them hungry was not going to work. So we decided to flip the script, and instead of trying to get them hungry and catch them by depriving them of food, we were going to try to catch them by making them dependent on us for food and giving them as much as they wanted, which may seem kind of strange, but this is how we went about it. So we took all the feeding bins and we swapped them for drop traps. So wherever there'd been a bin, we put a drop trap like you see here, and we put a plastic roof on it, corrugated plastic. And the way we started to train them because we figured if we can get them to go all the way into a drop trap, then we can figure out a way to shut the door behind them. And the way we train them, and this is relevant to outside a disaster response, and this is why I'm bringing it up today in this presentation, is if you have a feeding station and you can safely put a drop trap like you're seeing here at that location, you can use these methods, and in the end, we caught every single cat in the that survived the fire, 617 altogether. And the way we got those last really tough ones was this way. So you can use this at home if you're able to put a drop trap out. So the way you start the training, remember I talked about, the importance of understanding how training works. We put the food pan right inside the door, like you see here. So we're not ever going to lift this drop trap up off the ground. Everything is going to be done through the side door. So the pan is in a location where the cat does not have to enter the drop trap. All he has to do is stick his head in and eat. And again, this is the same idea. We're familiarizing the cat with the space in a non-threatening manner. So after the cat, and we would watch this on camera, after we saw the cat had been eating, or we could just observe the food being gone, after the cat had been comfortably eating for a couple of days, then we would move the pan to the middle of the trap. Now these, having that roof on also was great when because sometimes it would rain, and this kind of a station was great for protecting the food from the weather. The water we kept in those storage bins. You can see a little bit, if you look at the far left of this slide, you can see the edge of one of the storage bins. So we kept the water in there because, again, in the end, we're thinking we're going to trap these guys, so we didn't want a big pan of water in there while they're running around after getting trapped. So we kept the water separate in the bin and just the food and the drop trap. And you could see how they got comfortable and they would just go in and eat in the middle. So then once we saw them eating in the middle for a couple of days, naturally we moved the pan all the way to the back. So now we were ready to trap them, right? Because they're going in all the way. And now our challenge is to get the door shut. So we used remote controls, and you can see how we, at this point, introduced the side door and the remote control. And you can see how the remote control has a little trigger rod that sticks out and holds the side door up. Now, some of the cats we noticed as soon as they saw the door, they got wary, and it was something new that they were unfamiliar with. So what we recommend now, and we do now, is during that trap training that I just showed you, we keep the door tied on with a zip ties in this raised position, so that when it comes time to actually do the trapping, it's not something that's new to them. They're familiar with that as well. Didn't need to do that for all the cats, but some of the more where, as we got down in the cat population, of course, the cats got more and more wary and smart and difficult to catch. So you can train them with the door tied open, and that's what we recommend. So at this point, we're ready to go. And you can see here, everything's set. The trapper is some distance away. These remote controls have a pretty good range, anywhere from 100 to 300 feet. So you can be quite a ways away and just have to have eyes on the trap. So Kitty goes in and the door is shut. Now, if you're using this technique, there's a couple of ways that things can go wrong. And one of them is that when you pull the trigger on the remote control, it looks like a little gun trigger is the closest analogy I can give you. It's not like a gun. It's not like pull the trigger and then you're done. You have to keep the trigger pulled down until the door is all the way down, because what you're doing is you're sending a radio wave message to the receiver, which is what you see here, that has the trigger rod. You're telling that rod to pull back. When you let the trigger go, it breaks that message, and then the receiver thinks, oh, now I should stick the trigger back out. So if you squeeze it real quick, it could go back out real quick and catch the door before it's all the way down. So always just hold the trigger, keep it squeezed until the door is shut. Another thing that can potentially go wrong is that if you start the door on an angle, it could jam in the tracks. So try to start the door so it's what you saw in this previous slide. So it's straight up and down as much as possible. And if necessary, get some WD-40 and lubricate the tracks. Again, just to, look, 90% of the time you're not gonna have a problem, but it's that 10% that you're trying to be really careful not to have happen to you. So once we had that part down, we were able to catch a whole bunch of traps, a whole bunch of cats with the remote control on the side door. But the problem with that, from our perspective, was when there was about 120 or cats left, and we were down to maybe 35, 36 stations, because as we were trapping cats, we were constantly consolidating. If we trapped all the cats at a feeding station, we would close it, or if we trapped all the cats and we could see that the cats we hadn't trapped were eating somewhere else, then we would close it, because you want to, in this disaster response situation, you want to be constantly consolidating and getting the cats to be at one place, which makes it a lot easier to trap them than if they're spread all over. So as we got down to like maybe 40 or 50 cats that were left, they started to figure out what we were doing. And we would send the trappers in, maybe at 6 or 7 p.m. at night, and they would stay there till sometimes 2 in the morning. So the cats wouldn't come until 3 or 4. They knew something was up, and they just wouldn't come. And it became very difficult to have trappers sitting there waiting for 6, 7, 8 hours, and maybe the cat wouldn't show up, or if they did show up, it was very dark, and sometimes it was hard to see, and the timing of when to pull the trigger got more trickier and trickier as the cats got smarter and smarter. And it became like, oh my God, we're never going to get these 40 or 50 cats because number one, we can't have we're not able to get somebody there when they're coming. And even if we do, the possibility of human error is making it sometimes that they're escaping. So we had to figure something else out. And this is one of the things we tried. This is what we call the tunnel trap. And what we would do is take a normal box trap and tie it, lift or remove the rear door and zip tie it onto the side door of the drop trap, and then put the food pan, again, just inside the drop trap. So basically creating a tunnel with the box trap that the cat had to go through in order to reach the pan. And as you can see in this slide, the trip plate is, the box trap is set, the trip plate is up. And a number of these cats, fell for it, and on their way into the drop trap, they stepped on the trip plate and got caught in the box trap. So that's another technique. But that out of the 50 cats that were left, that worked on maybe a dozen of them. So now we're down to the last, like 3 to 4 dozen who wouldn't go for it. So we were, Susie and I were like, we're never going to get out of the burn zone if we don't figure out a way to get the drop trap side door to close by itself when nobody is there. So we proceeded to invent this. And it's, as you can see, it's very crude, and we're hoping to, we're not at a point we can share the plans because we haven't written them up. Actually, that's something we're going to try to do this weekend. And then we're going to be talking to some manufacturers and see if we can get this to be something that is standard that people can just purchase. But the idea is, and we call it the auto drop. So that white plastic you see in the back of the trap, first of all, we put the trap on a big piece of wood and tied it down so that there would be no way for a cat to escape if the side door shut. They could not dig their way out. And we created a trip plate, so that white plastic you see on the floor in the back is actually has a string on it that goes up through a pulley and then is attached to a trigger rod that was holding up the side door. So the cat steps on the trip plate, it pulls the string down and pulls the trigger rod out and causes the side door to shut. And the way we got the cats to step on the trip plate was, you could see we put the food pan in the back corner, and then we put a screen. Those are actually, I think, dish drying racks of some sort that we found at Target. And we tied them on to the top of the trap so that the cat could see the food, but he couldn't get to it without going around and stepping on the trip plate. So this also took a little bit of training. In the beginning, we just, again, kept the food pan at the front of the trap. When we saw the cat was comfortable going in, then we would move the food pan into the back corner. We would sometimes tie the screen up so that the cat didn't have to step on the trip plate, so he could go right to the back corner. Once he was doing that, we would lower the screen. A couple of the cats, we even had to train them. We had to block the trip plate so that it was always in an up position, because even that being raised spooked them. So it was really a step-by-step training process. And that got us our very last cats. In fact, a week ago, Sunday, we trapped the very last cat, and have a quick video to show you of this auto drop. And it's just a 15-second clip that the cameras took, but you can see how cat goes in. He's after the food in the back right corner. He steps on the trip plate, and it's pretty amazing how fast the door shuts. So there you have it. If you're interested in the auto drop, as I say, we will be drawing up the plans and the materials and things like that. But again, our great hope is that we can get this standard and commercially available because we found it was such a successful way to trap. Okay, so that concludes our excuse me, our lessons from the burn zone, and back to some tips and tricks. So camouflage is always another great way to fool the cats, to get them thinking that the trap is something familiar, that it's not a trap. So you can go, in this case, I'm not sure why we had the rear door open instead of the front door, but in any event, you can see how the trap is wrapped in burlap and then covered with branches and leaves and made to look like it's part of that bush. You can put the traps inside a cardboard box, like the box the trap comes in is perfect. Under a bush, under a board, anything to blend it into the environment is going to help make the cats a little less wary. You remember that green sunshade we used when we were training Silver Bob? That was the same idea to camouflage. If it's raining, wrapping the trap in a contractor, a thick plastic bag, that's a way to hide, disguise the trap. Also, cats tend to like dark covered spaces more than bright open ones, so and covering it will help with that, and also good for the rain. And let's see, moving on. So bait dishes, our favorite are what are called food boats, and that's the little French fry plates is what they're often called. They're not waterproof, but water resistant, so they hold liquid a lot longer than a paper plate or something like that. Now the tip is if you're using these boats and it's windy, you just take a piece of duct tape like you see here and put that on the bottom of the boat, press that down onto the back of the trap, and it won't go anywhere. You can also use clothespins to attach it to the side of the trap. This slide shows how the tendency of cats, because they're wary of going into box traps, to explore any other way to get to the bait besides going through the front door. So this is often something you see where the cats migrate to the back of the trap from the outside. So in order to take advantage of that tendency, you can do this, which is you take two traps, put them side by side, but pointing in different directions. So when they're at the back of one, they're also at the front of another, and that often will trick them into going in the one as they're exploring. Also notice how we have sheets tucked into the handles. I'm going to assume you guys know once you trap a cat, you cover the trap right away, and if you have the sheet right there, you don't have to go running around trying to find it. But don't do that on a windy day. You don't want the sheets flapping around. Now, cats who step over the trip plate, right? That's used to be more of a problem when the trip plates were not designed for cats. Back when we first started, we were using raccoon traps, and they had very small trip plates. Now they're a lot wider. But if you have a cat who still steps over them, this is how you get around that. You cover the trip plate with newspaper or cardboard, something that's light, and or a trap mat. I would say probably not cardboard, that's too stiff. And then you take a rod or a dowel of some sort or stick and run it through the trap just in front of the trip plate, like up, you can see 2, 3 of the squares. So what you're doing is, as the cat can't see the trip plate, so he doesn't know to step over it. And as he approaches it, he has to high step, and then his paws will come down on the trip plate without him knowing it. And here's a slide of that actually happening. This kitty was in one of our tunnel traps, and he kept getting to the bait without setting the box trap off. So this is what we did. We put the dowel through and forced him to step over and down, and in this way we did. You see, this is the moment where he triggers the trap, and the front door is shutting behind him. So let's talk about bait. I think the lesson, though, from this is be willing to experiment. If fish food is not working for you, then try something herbal. Try valerian root, or try fried chicken, or again, we always recommend using 2 kinds of bait at the same time, because it gives you twice as much chance of putting something in that's very attractive. But don't be afraid to experiment. And sometimes those of you who are saying you give them what they normally eat, sometimes that's the best thing. With these cats, the last cats that we caught in the burn zone, we tried a couple of times all right, let's just put a bunch of sardines in there, and they would not show up at all. They were so kind of spooked by anything that wasn't familiar that we just went right back to the dry food that they got every day. And in the end, that's what worked. So experiment. So how do you keep, if you're in a grassy field and there's lots of bugs, how do you keep the ants out of the bait so that when you come back in half an hour to check the traps, they're not like just crawling all over your food? This is how you do it. Ants can't swim. So, and other creatures as well will not cross water. So you create a little moat and put your bait in a little dish, a waterproof dish, and then put that dish in something like this plastic cover you see here that has just a little bit of water on the bottom of it, and that will keep your bait bug free. Now, just for those of you who are really determined and are willing to try something pretty exotic, this is a tomcat, as you can probably guess, and there is a way to attract tomcats who are really hard to catch, and that is the urine from a female cat in heat, believe it or not. And because it's so full of the scents that attract tomcats. So if you pour that onto a paper towel or a rag and you put it inside a box trap or under a drop trap, there's a very good chance your tomcat's going to come over to investigate and go under. Now, you're going to need to know somebody at your local spay-neuter clinic who likes you, but typically before a female cat is spayed, the vet techs will empty the bladder. I think they call it expressing the bladder. So if they can capture some of that urine in a little bottle or jar or something like that and give it to you, that bait is good for 24 hours. You can't refrigerate it and keep it longer. So you have to ask your clinic to be on the lookout, grab some of that for you when they spot a female in heat. And then you need to go out probably that night or the next day and try to catch your tomcat. There are less esoteric ways to use scent as well, of course. You can spray parts of your trap with a butter spray. Catnip spray is another idea. Fish oil, which you could see, just poke it with an awl and squeeze some drops out. Pounce, you can crumble. Well, I don't know if they make pounce anymore, but the equivalent, dry cat treat that you can crumble up. You can use that to make a trail. You can put it inside the trap. But these are all scents that will potentially attract your cat. If you're using catnip spray, don't overdo it. You don't want your cat rolling around in front of the trap. You want just enough to attract them, but not enough that they just start playing and don't bother with the bait. Sounds are really a powerful trick. So you can do what you see here, which is I got my iPhone and a speaker, an external speaker attached to it, which will make the sounds go a lot louder. And then depending on your situation will depend on what kind of sound you're using. So if you're trying to attract a female cat, you might be playing kittens, and all this stuff is on YouTube. So you might get kittens crying for the mom, or vice versa, the mom calling for the kittens. We've used the call of a female cat in heat to attract tomcats over, a mouse squeaking, bird cries. They're all things that cats are sensitized to and potentially will bring them over to your trap. So they may not get them all the way in, but the idea is you're bringing them over. Hopefully at that point your bait takes charge and the cats go in. And I mentioned that we would be talking about Violet again. So this is Violet as a little kitten. And her story was she was in a, we went over to trap at a hotel. And when we got inside in the basement, somebody came over with a laundry basket and Violet was inside. And she was pretty sick at that time and undernourished. But they told us the mom was in this storage room. It was this giant, almost warehouse-like storage room full of beds and cots and all sorts of hotel furniture. So absolutely no way to find the mom in there. So we set up a drop trap in the corner of the room, and Violet was too ill to use as bait, to put her in a cage and have her cry or something like that under the drop trap. So we got a YouTube video of a kitten crying for the mother and put that under the drop trap. The mom came shooting out from wherever she was, went straight under the drop trap, and we caught her that way. If you have the kittens in hand, you can use them to try to catch the mom. And the way you do that is you put the kittens in a carrier, and you put the carrier at the back of the trap. Then what you do is you cover the carrier and the back of the trap with a sheet. So the mom's going to hear the kittens or smell them, and the only way she can see them and get to them is by going through the trap towards the back, and that often will work to catch your mom. Now, keep in mind, the kittens are you can't leave them out there for long periods of time. So if it doesn't work in the first 20, 30 minutes, then try again another time. If you're trying to trap kittens, if you're using traps that do have a trigger, like a spring-loaded trap, you can do what's called setting the trigger lightly. And that's where you, instead of having the hook, the trigger hook that where the red arrow is pointed, instead of having that go all the way in on the elbow, which is normally where you would put it, you rest the front door on the very tip of the hook, the trigger hook, so that it will take very little weight on the trip plate to cause the front door to shut. That's what we call setting the trigger lightly. Okay, a bunch of gadgets I want to bring to your attention. The headlamps are great just in general, especially if you're trapping at night, because they free your hands. But another tip is if you're using headlights at night to light up the trap, let's say you're using a drop trap, you doing the side door remote control, or even if you're using it with a string. Cats don't see green or red light very well. So if you're concerned that if I light up this very normally dark space with a lot of light, that's going to freak the cats out and they're not going to come, get a headlamp or any lamp that has green or red light and use that to flood the trap, and it will not, they'll barely be able to see it, just the way their eyes are built. Binoculars are always a great thing to have, so you can be at a distance. Laser pointers are great for kittens and sometimes younger adults who you're trying to draw over to the trap if you start to play with them. let them see the laser, we call it the red fly, and start to move it around, try to get them to run after it and chase it. And you can actually run them right into a drop trap, or at least get them close to your other traps. The clear rear door up on the right there, that's a way of tricking the cats into thinking there's more than one way out. And it's very effective. You can get them from Tomahawk to fit whatever Tomahawk model traps you have. Now, they're so effective that we recommend you don't use them unless you have eyes on the trap, because what happens is you catch your cat and then they keep trying to run out the back door, and they can pretty much mess themselves up. Not to the point of serious injury, but they can bang up their faces pretty badly. So you want to be able to cover the trap very quickly once you've caught a cat that way. The other thing to keep in mind about clear rear doors is they have to be clear. If they get old and scratched up and they're really beaten up, you're better off replacing them because it's not going to work if they're not almost totally transparent. And Stacy had asked that question about cameras, and the kind of trail cameras we recommend, any trail cameras can be great, but once you've used a cellular trail camera, and basically that's a camera that transmits images in real time to your phone, you'll never go back to the non-cellulars because they're so much easier to use and they provide so much more useful information. So you're not going there and taking out SD cards and uploading them to your computer and having to search through them. You're just getting the data live and watching it on your phone. And if you're trapping at multiple locations at once and you've got a few of these out there, it really is a great tactical advantage, and you can trap at multiple spots at the same time. So I want to kind of conclude with what I call the story of Lulu. And this is an example of how you can use these tips and tricks in combination, and how if you have a lot of tools in your toolkit, you can start getting really creative. So this is not Lulu in the photo here. This is another member of that colony. But this is the rock wall at a resort where Lulu lived. Lulu is a little black and white feral kitten that we trapped as part of kind of maintaining the high spay-neuter sterilization level at this particular location. So we trapped this little black and white kitten, and we released her, a day or two later back at the bottom of the wall. So after we had released her, just trapped, just fixed, one of the employees at the hotel came up to us and said that he would like to adopt her, right? And he also said that, but he was leaving in a few days for a vacation and he needed to get her home before he left. So when we arrived a couple of days later, we figured, well, we'll give it a try. Why not? To make things even more difficult, when we got there, we found a large empty plate of recently eaten wet food at the base of the wall. So we had to trap a feral kitten we had just trapped and let go, who lived in an inaccessible spot, who'd probably just eaten. So how did we go about this? Well, first off, we arrived in the middle of the day because we figured that was the time it would be most likely that the adults would be asleep, but the kittens, being a kitten, Lulu would be more active. We also got a trap and we camouflaged it with the green sunshade netting, including, camouflaging the floor. And we put it at the base of the wall, made some foliage and baited it with sardines. And then we stepped back to see what we could observe. And this was Lulu. We spotted her pretty far up on the wall. So that was great. She was there. So that was step number one. So we hoped she'd come down smelling the sardines, but instead she curled up to take a nap. We used the laser pointer to try to get her attention and keep her awake and active. And that worked, but we couldn't get her to come down. She would just kind of swat at it up high up on the wall where she was. So the next thing we did was we got a YouTube video of kittens meowing, and we put the phone at the bottom of the wall. That did the trick. A few minutes later, she climbed down the wall, and then a moment after that, we heard the trapdoor shut. So today, Lulu is in her forever home with another kitten from that colony. And just to show you, even in these really tough situations, if you're creative and persistent, you can get your cat. So that said, I think we're ready to take some questions, Stacy.
Super. Excellent. Great presentation. Love the photos. Susie and Brian, you both just do an incredible job with the photos and the new content. And I'm going to do happy dance. I think the next cat trivia question is going to be, how many cats did Neighborhood Cats trap in the fire zone? So
I like that.
Folks, if you're at the next cat trivia,
you got a leg up on that one, yeah.
Farrellville, maybe not so much anymore. Maybe it's going to be the number of cats trapped at the fire zone. So anyway, congratulations. That's huge. I mean, just I can't even, I'm beaming because really, I know how many hours you all and the volunteers and the other folks involved will put into that. And I don't know of a situation where we've heard about such a really coordinated effort to help rescue those cats and to get them trapped and to do what needs to be done, because I believe you said that area is being totally bulldozed, right?
Well, yeah, I would say 95% of it is being excavated, where they have to literally knock down everything that's there and even remove the dirt down a foot or two to remove all the toxins from the situation. Yeah, so it's being completely demolished. There are some areas though where the houses survived and some of the buildings survived and the parks and things like that. So it's not 100% inhospitable to cats, but it's, yeah, we wanted to get them out. It's not a safe place.
Not a safe place, right? So where we promote, you don't remove cats unless you absolutely have to. This is one of those absolutely have to situations. Yep. Just clarifying, it's not an everyday occurrence. We're going to be trapping and removing cats from an area for sure. All right. One question I had that I wanted to ask your opinion on. So I was asked for my opinion on when a cat is spayed and it's in heat, can we release that cat within 24 hours, or should we hold that cat back for a week, 2 weeks before it returns to the colony because of all the hormonal stuff going on?
Yeah, I mean, I think it totally depends on the skill level of your surgeon. And if they're making very small incisions and they're very experienced, high volume spay neuter, probably 24 hours is plenty. If you want to be extra careful, then 48 hours, but a week or two, no. Even if you have an inexperienced surgeon who makes a larger spay scar, then maybe you're talking 3 days at the most, unless you see something else going on. But at a certain point, especially if the cat is feral, you're doing more harm than good by continuing to confine them because of the stress of the situation.
This is an interesting question. So what is the best, least awkward way to scan a trapped cat for a microchip?
Yeah, that we saw that. Well, by far the best way, if you've got $700 or $800, is to get a wand, a microscope scanning wand. It's literally a long tube that you can fit through the trap that will read whether there's a microchip. But barring that, you can just get a regular microchip reader and duct tape it onto like a stick or a dowel. And if you've got depending on the kind of trap you have, you can fit it through, like the TrueCatch traps. You can fit that through the front door without opening it and reach in and scan it that way. Otherwise, wait until they're sedated and let the vet staff do the scanning for you.
Several questions asking what happened to the cats after you trapped them from the fire area.
So all the cats were brought. That's a great question. I'm glad somebody asked that. they were brought to the Maui Humane Society. We were working under them. We're their subcontractor for the trapping part of this. Those cats, about, I would say 25% of them were reunited with their owners, who had lost them during the fire. A lot of them went to the Lanai Cat Sanctuary, and a number of them are in what we call a catio program, where the Maui Humane Society sets up catios, pre-built catios at people's homes, and then a couple of cats at a time are relocated to these situations. So between the sanctuary, the relocations, and the reunifications, about 500 to 550 of those cats have already been processed through the system. So the only ones, there were very few that ended up euthanized, and that was usually because they were pretty sick. We did find that most of the cats, because of the regularity and the quality of the food we were providing, they came out of the burn zone in pretty good health.
Yeah, just to reiterate, it would definitely say cats should be returned when you are doing TNR, 24 to 48 hours. Also reminding folks that this is a recorded video, and you'll get access to this recording by about 10 o'clock tonight by GoToWebinar. Then we're going to edit it. We'll put it up on our YouTube page. And please share this far and wide, just everywhere. There are so many tips and tricks here that we want to get those last cats. Colony, I've seen so many locations that were down to 4 to 6 unspayed or neutered cats, and then the pandemic happened. They couldn't get access to appointments. You take 2 or 3 unspayed females, and 4 years down the line, what do you have? It's another mess. And so it's as much as we hear in other places, oh, well, you're only supposed to you're okay if you get 80% of the cats. I feel we need to get every last one of those cats.
Yeah, absolutely. The goal should always be as close to 100% as possible, and ideally 100%.
All right, we are right at 4 o'clock. I know that there's some other questions out there, and Susie has been doing a tremendous job. She's been peppered with questions all day today.
Great.
She's been doing a great job responding to them all. We will give us a couple of weeks. We'll keep sorting through questions, but if anybody has an urgent question, please feel free to email me, and I'll make sure it gets to the right place, Stacy at Community Cats Podcast. Before we close out, Brian, do you have any tips or tricks with regards to trapping an injured cat?
Well, sure. Well, injured cats still need to eat. So, all the same tips and tricks apply. I know there was a question about if a cat had a severe upper respiratory infection and couldn't smell, that is a real obstacle. What you want to do in that case is probably set up a drop trap and do something that will catch the cat's attention. It could be like hang a feather, use a laser beam, the pointer to get the cat moving in that direction, and use stuff that's super, super smelly. And even eventually at some point they will respond to food just out of sheer hunger, and at least go over to check it out. So yeah, don't give up. But in terms of injuries like a bad tail or a broken foot or something like that, it's all about hunger and food.
Excellent. Well, I want to thank everybody again for tuning in this afternoon and for turning your passion for cats into action. Stacy at communitycatspodcast.com. If you want me to email the handouts to you, happy to do that. And thank you all, and enjoy the rest of your Saturday.